In the wake of the terror attacks in Brussels and Paris, an alarming new report details the growing threat from radical Islamists around the world. The nonprofit Investigative Project on Terrorism says that an average of nearly 30,000 people per year have been killed by terrorists over the past 5 years. That's a nearly 800% increase. The report finds two disturbing trends. More attacks are happening, and they tend to be deadlier, with Islamists spreading to more countries than ever before. And it's not just ISIS, but Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, the Taliban, and Al-Qaeda, far from being on the run, as the Obama administration has said in the past. So, Julie, I want to go to you first on this, because according to this report, our suspicions that terror, of course, is on the rise. Didn't realize an 800% increase, but a completely different storyline than we hear what's coming out of the White House, that we're winning the war on terror, that groups like ISIS have been contained. So why one side saying one thing and the other side saying another?
Well, this group in particular that put out the study has some credibility issues, but I'll leave that aside. Obviously, terrorism is increasing. We see it all in the news reports every day. I don't know about these specific numbers as to whether they're accurate or not. I will say this. Look, we have one of two choices, right? And we have to really look at this seriously. We've talked about this on the couch for months, and Andrea, and I think you and I tend to agree on this to some extent. If we want to really make an attempt at this, if we really want to get terrorism and terrorists where they are, we need to go in full force militarily, put men and women on the ground, and make a generational, not even a decade-long commitment, but really a generational commitment to several continents, to Africa, to parts of Asia, certainly to the Middle East. That's a discussion worth having.
I can't believe we agree on that one.
Right. The problem for me is that nobody's having this discussion. Everybody's saying we need to get them, but nobody's talking about what that entails. It's certainly a discussion worth having. But I really want the American people to start having it, and for everybody to stop patronizing us and saying there's some easy way to contain this threat. This threat is global. You're talking essentially about starting World War III on many different continents, and that to me is incredibly troubling. And it's a conversation that we need to have, honestly.
And I think, Sandra, you don't even need this study. I mean, if you just look at what we talk about here on Outnumbered every single day, you see over the weekend a bomb blast in Pakistan. We see what Boko Haram is doing. We see what ISIS is doing in the Middle East. We see, I mean, and on and on and on. And then we saw what happened right here in San Bernardino. We saw what happened in Boston. What is it going to take? Because we've seen it happen here on the homeland. We've seen refugees, both in California and in Texas, be arrested, yet we've seen this administration unwilling to re-examine any of it.
Well, if you listen to General Jack Keane, which I do, and Ambassador John Bolton and the likes of these very smart individuals who have looked at history and what we need to first identify the enemy, which is step number one. And Andrea, when you look at this study, as you say, it points out the obvious, and what we've been talking about on this couch for quite some time. It's predicting Islamic attacks in Europe will increase over the next 18 to 24 months. That is what this election is becoming about. People are fearful that it's going to happen there, it's going to happen here, that this is spreading. Terrorism in Africa, Judge, will expand numerically and geographically. Jihadists will expand their efforts and focus in South and Southeast Asia. I mean, these are terrifying predictions.
Yeah, part of the reason this is growing so much is basically terror groups have franchised. They're no longer an isolated group. They've sent off satellites to different countries. They're launching attacks from different countries. I mentioned before when I was on the show that in 2006, I went on a trip with the Pentagon to the Middle East, and we had military briefings. And back then, they're talking about 10 years ago, we were already aware of the fact, in these briefings they were discussing how France was in a very, very delicate state with the amount of extreme Muslim extremists that leaning towards terrorism type activities that were moving in and starting to establish footholds there.
It's been 10 years. What do you do about something like Brussels, where, you know, it's happening outside the airport? What do? You move the security checkpoint out there. Okay, well, then the target just changes. I think that we need to make sure also, and I'm going to say my little libertarian thing that everyone's going to be mad about, but we need to make sure that we don't let fear, it is something that needs to be dealt with and identified, but to be its own threat to our liberty by passing these policies. Like when they take my deodorant at the airport, I don't really think that it's helping anybody at all.
But one of the things that they made clear 10 years ago was we either fight them over there or we fight them over here. If we stop fighting them over there and say it's not our fight, we're going to come home, what we give them is the ability to establish, create a caliphate, as they've done, and then launch attacks to here. And that's what we're seeing.
I think that Europe is in real trouble.
They're in big trouble.
After big trouble, and it's not becoming safe to live in these cities, to be in these cities, and they're looking to the United States of America to lead on this and point out that multiculturalism and all of these lax immigration policies and open borders have failed, have completely failed, and you can't do that when you have an administration that's duplicating exactly the mistakes that they made.
All right.